She fell for the Hell's Angel biker who destroyed her family. What happened next shocked the whole city. She grew up believing one man was the reason her parents were dead. A biker. An outlaw. The villain everyone hated. Then, one quiet day, while doing community service, she meets him, without knowing who he is. He's kind. He's calm. He believes in redemption. And against everything she was taught, she starts to fall for him. But when she learns his identity, her heart shatters. Because the man she loves is the man the city blames. Then a hidden file surfaces, sealed records, a truth buried for years. What if her family wasn't innocent? What if the man everyone hates tried to stop it all? Now she must choose, protect her family's legacy, or tell the truth that could destroy it. When the whole city is watching, will she stand for love and truth, or stay silent and live the lie forever? Tell me in the comments where you're watching from right now, and if this story speaks to you, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. The autumn morning pressed against Sloan Whitmore's bedroom window with a heavy gray stillness. She stood before her mirror, fingers trembling slightly as they traced the delicate golden edges of her mother's favorite brooch. The piece was simple, a small oval with intricate leaves etched across its surface, but its weight felt immense in her hands. "Another year," she whispered, carefully pinning it to her black dress. The fabric was modest and understated, much like everything else in her carefully ordered apartment. Clean lines, neutral colors, and a place for everything. Her mother would have approved. Sloane's gaze drifted to the framed photo on her dresser, her parents at their last Christmas celebration, their faces bright with laughter. The image blurred as tears threatened, but she blinked them back. Public composure had become second nature over the years, since the warehouse explosion that took them both. The explosion. Even now, 5 years later, the words felt raw in her mind. She remembered the late-night phone call, the rush to the hospital, the devastating news delivered in sterile hallways. But it was the aftermath that truly shaped her, the way grief had driven her deeper into her faith, seeking answers in scripture and solace in prayer. "Lord," she prayed softly, smoothing her dress, "grant me grace for today." The drive downtown was familiar, each landmark a reminder of years past. The old courthouse where her father had worked countless pro bono cases, the community center where her mother had organized fundraisers. The city had been their life's work, their legacy of service. The memorial site was already filling with people when she arrived. City council members in dark suits, local business owners, longtime family friends, all gathering beneath the slate October sky. A podium had been set up near the dedication plaque, flanked by arrangements of white roses. "Miss Whitmore." Mayor Davidson approached, his hand extended. "Thank you for being here. Your parents would be proud of how you've carried on their spirit of service." Sloan nodded, accepting the expected condolences with a practiced smile. She had learned to wear grief like a gentle veil, present but translucent, allowing her to function in these moments of public scrutiny. The ceremony began precisely at 10 o'clock. From her seat in the front row, Sloan could hear the rustle of the crowd settling behind her. Mayor Davidson stepped to the podium, his voice carrying across the gathered assembly. "We come together today to honor James and Margaret Whitmore, whose generosity and integrity helped shape our city." The words washed over her, familiar as a well-worn prayer. Stories of her father's legal work defending the disadvantaged, tales of her mother's tireless community organizing, their shared vision of a city where justice and compassion walked hand in hand. But even as the mayor spoke of unity and healing, Sloan could see the protesters across the street. Their signs rose above the police barrier, crude cardboard declarations condemning biker violence and demanding justice. One name appeared again and again: Gabriel Mercer. The whispers reached her ears despite the distance. Criminal. Murderer. Should have gotten life. The venom in those words made her chest tight, though her face remained carefully neutral. Sloane knew what they didn't, or refused to see: the complexity buried beneath headlines and hasty judgments, her own private conviction, built on sleepless nights of prayer and reflection, that forgiveness was not just an option, but a holy mandate. Even when justice seemed incomplete, even when questions remained unanswered. The ceremony continued with more speeches, more memories shared. Sloane accepted hugs and handshakes, murmured thanks for kind words. But her mind was already drifting to the evening ahead, to the quiet sanctuary of the City Museum, where she had volunteered to help catalog archived court donations. As the crowd finally began to disperse, she lingered by the memorial plaque. The metal surface caught what little sunlight filtered through the clouds, making the engraved words gleam. James and Margaret Whitmore. Servants of justice and community, forever in our hearts. Miss Whitmore? A soft voice interrupted her thoughts. It was Sarah Chen, the museum's head archivist. We're still on for this evening? We have quite a collection of historical court documents that need organizing. Yes, of course. Sloane welcomed the distraction. I'll be there at 6. Wonderful. These records are such an important part of our city's history. Your parents would appreciate the work of preserving them. Sloane nodded, though something in Sarah's tone made her pause. There was an undertone she couldn't quite read, a weight to the words that seemed to suggest more than simple appreciation for historical preservation. The rest of the day passed in a blur of necessary tasks and polite conversations. As evening approached, Sloane changed into more comfortable clothes and drove to the museum. The building's classical architecture rose against the darkening sky, its columns casting long shadows across the steps. Inside, the main halls were quiet, most visitors gone for the day. Her footsteps echoed on the marble floor as she made her way to the archives section. The room smelled of old paper and wood polish, metal filing cabinets lining the walls like silent sentinels. Sarah greeted her with a warm smile and a stack of boxes. These just came in from the courthouse basement. Records from various cases, some going back decades. They need to be sorted, cataloged, and properly stored. I'm happy to help, Sloane said, settling at a work table. Where should I start? Any box is fine. Just be thorough. Sometimes the most important details are hidden in the smallest notes. Sloane opened the first box, unaware that among these yellowed papers and faded ink lay the seeds of revelation that would shake her carefully constructed world to its foundations. But for now, she simply began to sort, finding comfort in the methodical work of preserving history, one document at a time. The morning dawned crisp and clear as Sloane pulled into the parking lot of the old community center. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles white with tension. The city's rehabilitation program for ex-offenders was starting today, and she had volunteered to help coordinate the restoration project. Part of her wondered if she was making a mistake. She checked her watch, 7:45 in the morning. Early, but others were already here. Elderly volunteers from local churches shuttled supplies from their cars, while a few program participants helped unload paint cans and lumber. The sight of their orange safety vests made her throat tighten. Taking a deep breath, Sloane gathered her clipboard and project plans. The renovations would take a week. Repainting the center's exterior, fixing broken steps, installing new railings, and landscaping the grounds. Simple work that would make a big difference for the neighborhood. As she walked toward the building, she noticed him immediately. Tall and broad-shouldered, Gabriel Mercer worked with quiet efficiency, helping Mrs. Patterson, an 80-year-old church volunteer, carry boxes of supplies. His movements were careful, deliberate, as if he was always aware of how his size might intimidate others. "Let me take those, ma'am," he said softly, reaching for a heavy box. "These stairs can be tricky," Mrs. Patterson beamed at him. "Such a gentleman." "Thank you, dear." Sloane watched the interaction, something shifting uncomfortably in her chest. This wasn't the hardened criminal from newspaper headlines. The man before her moved with a grace born of consideration for others, his head slightly bowed, as if trying to make himself smaller, less threatening. The morning progressed with orientation and safety briefings. Sloane kept to her coordinator role, distributing assignments and supplies. She noticed how Gabriel listened intently to instructions, asked relevant questions about proper techniques, and helped explain procedures to others who seemed confused. By mid-morning, the work was in full swing. The sound of scraping paint and gentle chatter filled the air. Sloane moved between groups, checking progress and offering guidance. Each time she passed near Gabriel, she found him focused on his tasks, whether sanding rough spots or applying primer with careful strokes. "Miss Whitmore?" Mrs. Patterson called out. "Could you help me organize the lunch setup? My arthritis is acting up something fierce today." Sloane welcomed the distraction. In the community center's kitchen, they arranged donated sandwiches and drinks for the volunteers. Through the window, she could see Gabriel showing another participant how to properly hold a paint roller for even coverage. "That young man," Mrs. Patterson said, following her gaze. "He's got good hands for detail work. Been helping me with the heavy lifting all morning, too." Sloane nodded, uncertain how to respond. The lunch bell rang, saving her from having to comment. Workers began filtering into the center's main room, forming casual groups around folding tables. Sloane found herself at the end of one table and somehow wasn't surprised when Gabriel quietly took the seat across from her, leaving plenty of space between them. They ate in silence at first, but it wasn't uncomfortable. There was something peaceful about his presence, a steadiness that seemed to create a bubble of calm around him. "The sandwiches are good," he said finally, his voice low and gentle. "Mrs. Patterson said you helped arrange the donations." "The local deli owner is generous," Sloane replied, surprised by how easy it was to speak with him. "He believes in second chances." Gabriel nodded, understanding the weight behind her words. "Second chances are sacred things," he said. "Not everyone gets them. Not everyone deserves them." "Who decides what we deserve?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. He considered this, taking a slow sip of water. "Sometimes life decides, sometimes other people. But mostly, I think it's about what we do with whatever chance we're given, deserved or not." They talked more as lunch continued, never touching directly on their shared history, but circling around deeper themes. Loss, accountability, the role of faith in healing. Gabriel spoke thoughtfully, each word chosen with care, never pushing or presuming. "My mother used to say that faith isn't about having all the answers," Sloane found herself sharing. "It's about trusting there are answers, even when we can't see them." "Wise woman," Gabriel replied softly. "Sometimes the not knowing is part of the journey." The afternoon passed in a blur of activity. The first coat of paint went up, transforming the center's weathered walls. New lumber was cut for the steps, measuring twice before each cut. Gabriel worked steadily, often taking on the heaviest tasks without being asked. As dusk approached, volunteers began packing up for the day. Sloane checked off items on her clipboard, making notes for tomorrow's tasks. She was so focused on her list that she didn't notice Gabriel's approach until his shadow fell across her paper. "It's getting dark," he said quietly. "Let me walk you to your car." She hesitated only briefly before nodding. They walked in companionable silence across the parking lot, their footsteps crunching on fallen leaves. At the stairs leading to the lower level where she had parked, Gabriel paused. "Careful here," he said, pointing to the third step. "It's loose. We'll fix it tomorrow, but for now, best to skip that one." The warning was simple, practical, but it struck Sloane deeply. This man, who had every reason to be bitter or defensive, instead showed consistent care for others' well-being, even in the smallest ways. It shook her more than any grand gesture could have. "Thank you," she said, meaning more than just the warning about the step. Gabriel nodded once, understanding in his eyes, then turned and walked away, his figure silhouetted against the sunset. Sloane stood for a moment, watching him go, feeling the familiar boundaries of her world shift ever so slightly. Dawn painted soft streaks of pink across Sloane's bedroom ceiling as she knelt beside her bed, hands clasped in prayer. Her thoughts kept drifting to the previous evening, the quiet strength in Gabriel's voice, the gentle way he'd warned her about the broken step. Such simple moments, yet they lingered like autumn leaves caught in still water. "Lord," she whispered, "help me see clearly. Help me understand the stirring in my heart." The morning light warmed her face as she remained there, seeking guidance in the familiar ritual of morning devotion. When she arrived at the community center 2 hours later, the parking lot was already half full. The day promised to be warmer than yesterday, and volunteers were getting an early start before the heat set in. Sloane checked the day's assignment sheet and felt her pulse quicken. She and Gabriel were paired together to work on the center's library shelving. He was already there when she entered, carefully removing old brackets from the walls. "Good morning," he said softly, offering a small nod. Something in his quiet acknowledgement made the room feel more peaceful. "Good morning," she replied, setting down her bag. "Where should I start?" They fell into an easy rhythm, working side by side in comfortable silence. Gabriel held the new shelving steady while Sloane marked drilling points. She steadied the latter as he mounted higher brackets. When words came, they were natural, emerging from the flow of their tasks. "My father used to say the true measure of work is in the details others might never notice," Sloane said, running her hand along a perfectly level shelf. Gabriel smiled slightly, the expression gentle in his weathered face. "Integrity isn't about recognition," he agreed. "It's about doing right even when no one's looking." As morning stretched toward noon, their conversation deepened like a slow-moving stream finding its course. During a water break, Gabriel spoke of his beliefs about redemption, his voice thoughtful. "Some folks think saying sorry is enough," he said, looking down at his calloused hands. "Or that you can just claim redemption like checking a box. But real redemption, that's lived out day by day. It's in the choosing over and over to do better. To be better." Sloane leaned against the wall, considering his words. "I understand that," she said finally. "Sometimes I feel trapped by what others expect me to be, the perfect daughter carrying on a perfect legacy. But perfection isn't truth. It's a cage." Gabriel's eyes met hers, full of understanding. Living up to others' expectations can be its own kind of prison. Their moment of connection was interrupted by raised voices from the hallway. A group of teenage volunteers had been helping paint the community center's entrance. Now one of them, a slight boy with glasses, was backed against the wall while 2 older teens loomed over him. "Think you're too good to get your hands dirty?" one of the older boys sneered. "Bet your fancy private school doesn't teach you about real work." Before Sloane could intervene, Gabriel was already moving. His presence filled the hallway as he stepped between the boys, his voice firm but calm. "That's enough," he said quietly. The authority in his tone needed no volume to carry weight. "We're all here to help, and harassment has no place in that." The bullies stepped back, muttering under their breath. Gabriel turned to the younger boy, whose hands were shaking. "Come on," he said gently. "I could use some help measuring trim in the library. Sometimes precise work needs steady hands more than strong ones." Sloane watched as Gabriel guided the grateful teenager back to their workroom, showing him how to use the measuring tape with patience and respect. The incident revealed layers to Gabriel she hadn't expected, not just physical protection, but emotional understanding and moral clarity. The rest of the afternoon passed in productive harmony. As volunteers began gathering their things to leave, Sloane felt lighter than she had in years. Hope, she realized, could arrive quietly, like morning light through a window. She was collecting the sign-in sheets for her daily report when her eyes caught on a signature near the bottom of the page. The pen had pressed deeply into the paper, leaving clear impressions. Gabriel Mercer. The name hit her like a physical blow. Mercer. The whispers at the memorial, the protesters' signs, the warehouse explosion that had taken her parents. The hope that had been blooming in her chest froze solid, becoming something sharp and painful. She stared at the signature until the letters blurred, feeling the weight of unspoken history descend like gathering storm clouds. Every quiet moment, every gentle word, every careful action of the day took on new meaning as past and present collided in that single name. Mercer. Sloane's hands trembled as she typed Gabriel Mercer into the court records database. The soft glow of her laptop screen illuminated her tear-stained face in the darkness of her apartment. It was well past midnight, but sleep felt impossible. Her mind kept replaying every interaction, every gentle word, every kind gesture, now tainted by devastating possibility. The search results loaded. Her breath caught in her throat. State versus Gabriel James Mercer. The case file appeared before her, dated 8 years ago. With each click, more details emerged, painting a horrifying picture. Gabriel had been arrested in connection with the warehouse explosion that killed her parents. The police had claimed he was part of a Hells Angels operation using the building for illegal activities. Though later released due to insufficient evidence, his name had become synonymous with that tragic night in the public's mind. Sloane pushed away from her desk, feeling sick. The quiet man who had steadied ladders for elderly volunteers, who had protected that young boy, who had spoken so earnestly about redemption. This was the same person accused of involvement in her parents' deaths. She barely slept that night, tossing and turning as memories of her parents mingled with recent images of Gabriel's gentle smile. When dawn finally broke, she dressed with determined movements, steel entering her spine. She deserved answers. The morning air was crisp as Sloane arrived at the worksite earlier than usual. Her heart pounded when she spotted Gabriel already there, carefully measuring wood for new baseboards. Several other volunteers milled about, preparing for the day's tasks. "How dare you?" Her voice cut through the morning quiet like a blade. Heads turned. Gabriel slowly straightened, his expression carefully neutral as he met her gaze. "How dare you work alongside me, knowing who you are, knowing what you did?" Sloane's voice shook, but she forced herself to continue. "Gabriel Mercer, the man connected to the warehouse explosion that killed my parents." The room fell silent. Someone gasped. Gabriel remained still, his eyes never leaving hers, filled with a deep sadness that only fueled her anger. "Did you think I wouldn't find out? That you could just—" She gestured helplessly. "Just be this kind, helpful person and make everyone forget." "I never wanted to deceive you," Gabriel said quietly. His calmness in the face of her fury was maddening. "Then why didn't you tell me?" Sloane demanded, tears threatening to spill. "Why pretend to be something you're not? I'm not pretending." Gabriel's voice remained steady, though pain flickered in his eyes. "I tried to warn your parents about what was happening at that warehouse. I failed. They died because I wasn't fast enough, wasn't convincing enough. That's something I live with every day." His simple admission struck her like a physical blow. There was no defense, no justification, just raw truth and evident remorse. It somehow hurt more than if he had argued or tried to explain away his involvement. "I can't." Sloane wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly feeling cold despite the warm morning. "I can't be here." She turned and fled, ignoring the concerned calls of other volunteers. Her vision blurred as she drove to the museum, seeking refuge in the familiar quiet of the archives. Work. She needed to work, to focus on anything else but the way her heart felt like it was being torn in two. For hours, she lost herself in cataloging, barely registering what she was handling until a particular folder caught her attention. It had been misfiled among her parents' charitable donation records, court documents that should have been sealed. Her hands shook as she opened it, telling herself she should return it to the proper authorities, but something made her pause. As she read, her world tilted further off its axis. Financial records, wire transfers, notes about offshore accounts, all pointing to systematic money laundering through her parents' charitable foundation. The dates aligned perfectly with the period leading up to the warehouse explosion. "No," Sloane whispered, reading the documents again and again, willing them to say something different. "No, this can't be right." But the evidence was there in black and white. Pages and pages of it, accidentally preserved among innocuous donation receipts. Her parents, whose reputation for integrity had been her North Star, whose memory she had defended for 8 years. They had been involved in something dark and illegal. Gabriel's words echoed in her mind. "I tried to warn your parents." Warn them about what? The explosion? Or about something else entirely? The archive room felt suffocating as night fell. Security lights cast strange shadows across the walls as Sloane gathered the damning documents with trembling hands. She made copies, her mind racing with implications. Everything she had believed about that night, about her parents, about Gabriel, none of it was what it seemed. The heavy archive room door clicked shut behind her, its sound final and ominous in the empty museum. Sloane clutched the copied documents to her chest, feeling as though she was carrying a bomb that could destroy not just her parents' legacy, but her entire understanding of truth and justice. As she walked to her car through the darkened parking lot, the weight of uncertainty pressed down on her shoulders. The man she had begun to care for, whom she had just publicly accused of destroying her family. What if he had actually tried to prevent that destruction? And her, parents, whose memory she had cherished as perfect and pure, what secrets had they carried to their graves? The documents in her hands held answers that threatened to unravel everything she thought she knew about love, truth, and redemption. Dawn crept through Sloane's bedroom window, finding her already awake, having barely slept. Dark circles shadowed her eyes as she sat cross-legged on her bed, surrounded by the copied documents she'd spread out like a mysterious puzzle. She'd been up most of the night, her mind racing, but now she needed to approach this methodically. "Okay," she whispered to herself, reaching for her laptop. "Let's do this properly." She created a simple spreadsheet, her fingers trembling slightly as she typed in dates, account numbers, and transaction amounts. The morning light grew stronger as she worked, cross-referencing every detail. Each entry felt like another crack in the foundation of everything she'd believed. A wire transfer from the Cayman Islands dated 3 days before the explosion. A series of donations that seemed normal on the surface, but showed suspicious patterns when laid out chronologically. Shell companies whose names appeared in both her parents' records and in the sealed court documents. Sloane got up only to make coffee, her stomach too knotted to handle food. The morning bled into afternoon as she dug deeper, checking and double-checking her findings against public records and old news articles. She couldn't deny it anymore. The evidence was real. Her parents' charitable foundation had been used to move millions of dollars of questionable money. "Why?" she asked the empty room, her voice breaking. "What were you involved in?" Around 4 o'clock, she couldn't take the solitude anymore. The truth was hammering at her skull, demanding action. She needed answers, real ones, from someone who had been there. With shaking hands, she pulled out her phone and typed a message to the volunteer coordinator, asking for Gabriel's contact information. The response came quickly, along with a concerned note about yesterday's confrontation. Sloane ignored it, focusing only on the phone number she needed. She took several deep breaths before typing. "Can we meet? Somewhere public. I have questions." Sloane. His reply was immediate. "Of course. Name the place and time." She chose a cafe downtown, neutral territory, well lit, always busy enough to feel safe but quiet enough for conversation. 7 tonight, she suggested. "I'll be there." The next 2 hours crawled by as Sloane tried to organize her thoughts. What exactly did she want to know? Everything. Nothing. The truth, whatever it was. She arrived early, choosing a corner table that gave her a clear view of both the entrance and the emergency exit. Old habits died hard. Gabriel arrived precisely at 7, his tall frame somehow looking smaller, more contained, as if trying not to frighten her. He wore simple jeans and a clean work shirt, his hands rough from manual labor but meticulously clean. He waited for her nod before sitting down. "Thank you for meeting me," Sloane said quietly, wrapping her hands around her coffee cup to stop them from shaking. "Thank you for asking," Gabriel replied, his voice gentle but serious. "I imagine you found something." Sloane glanced around before pulling out a single sheet of paper, a summary she'd prepared of the most damning evidence. She slid it across the table. "I need to understand." Gabriel studied the paper carefully, his expression growing grimmer with each line. Finally, he looked up, meeting her eyes directly. "What's your first question?" "Were my parents criminals?" The words hurt coming out, but she had to know. "No," Gabriel said firmly. "They were being used. Your parents believed they were helping legitimate businesses invest in community development. They didn't know they were being used to launder money for much bigger operations." Sloane let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "But you knew." "I figured it out gradually. I was running security for some of the warehouse operations. Legitimate ones, I thought at first. But things didn't add up. I started noticing patterns like the ones you found in these documents." He gestured to the paper between them. "By the time I understood what was really happening, your parents were in deep, not by choice, but by manipulation." "You said you tried to warn them," Sloane prompted, remembering his words from yesterday. Gabriel nodded, pain flickering across his face. "I tried 3 times. The first 2 times, they didn't believe me. Why would they trust a biker over respected business partners? The third time..." He paused, swallowing hard. "The third time was the night of the explosion. I had proof, finally, real documentation. But I was too late." "Why didn't you come forward afterward? Tell the police what you knew?" A bitter smile crossed Gabriel's face. "Who would believe me? A Hell's Angel versus pillars of the community? The people behind it all made sure I was seen as the prime suspect. It was easier to blame the biker than look deeper at respected businessmen and their connections." Sloane sat back, processing this. "So you just accepted the blame?" "I accepted responsibility for my part in it, for not acting sooner, for not finding a way to make your parents believe me before it was too late. The rest..." He shrugged slightly. Sometimes the truth has to wait for its time. They sat in silence for several minutes, the cafe's ambient noise washing over them. Sloane studied Gabriel's face, seeing now what she'd missed before. The weight of carried guilt, yes, but not the guilt of causing her parents' death. Rather, the guilt of failing to prevent it. "What happens now?" she asked finally. "These documents, they prove things that powerful people wanted hidden." "That's your decision," Gabriel said quietly. "I've carried this truth for 8 years. Now you have it too. What you do with it, that has to be your choice." Sloane gathered the paper back into her bag, feeling the weight of decision pressing down on her shoulders. The truth was no longer something she could avoid or deny. It sat there, demanding to be acknowledged, threatening to change everything she'd believed about her past. She stood up, needing space to think. "I need time." "I understand," Gabriel said, remaining seated. "Whatever you decide, be careful. Truth this big has consequences." Sloane nodded, unable to form more words. She walked out of the cafe into the cool evening air, her mind spinning with revelations. Her parents hadn't been criminals, but they'd been used by them. Gabriel wasn't their killer, but the man who tried to save them. Everything she'd believed about that night had been carefully constructed lies. The weight of truth pressed down on her shoulders as she walked to her car, knowing that whatever she decided to do next would change not just her life, but many others as well. The morning sun filtered through the stained glass windows of First Baptist Church, casting colorful patterns across the worn wooden pews. Sloane sat in the last row, watching Pastor Helen arrange flowers at the altar. Her hands fidgeted with the strap of her purse, which held the documents that had upended her world. "Pastor Helen?" she called softly. "Do you have a moment?" Helen Brooks turned, her gentle smile warming as she recognized Sloane. "Of course, dear. Let's sit in my office where we can talk privately." Sloane followed the pastor down a narrow hallway to a small but cozy office. Books lined the walls, and a cross hung above the desk. The familiar scent of coffee and old books helped calm her racing heart. "What's troubling you?" Helen asked, settling into her chair. "I can see something heavy on your mind." Sloane chose her words carefully. "How do we balance honoring someone's memory with telling the truth, even if that truth might change how people see them?" Helen's eyes showed understanding. "This is about your parents? What if—" Sloane paused, gathering courage. "What if someone's legacy isn't exactly what people think? If revealing the truth might hurt people who've found comfort in that legacy?" "Truth and grace often walk hand in hand," Helen said thoughtfully. "Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is speak truth, even when it's difficult. But first, we must be certain of that truth, and clear about our motives for revealing it. And if the truth might help someone who was wrongly blamed?" Helen leaned forward slightly. "Sloane, God's timing is perfect. If He's revealing truth to you now, there's purpose in it. But before taking action, pray for wisdom and clarity. Let His peace guide your decisions." Tears welled in Sloane's eyes. "I'm scared, Pastor Helen. Everything I thought I knew—" "Change can be frightening," Helen acknowledged, reaching across to squeeze Sloane's hand. "But remember, God doesn't call us to preserve comfortable illusions. He calls us to walk in truth, even when that path is harder." They prayed together, Helen's steady voice asking for guidance and courage. When they finished, Sloane felt steadier, though the weight of decision still pressed heavily. Back at her apartment, Sloane spread the documents across her dining room table. She created a detailed timeline, marking significant financial transactions, meetings, and events leading up to the warehouse explosion. The pattern became clearer with each entry: money moving through seemingly legitimate channels, her parents' signatures on documents they likely hadn't fully understood, and Gabriel's attempted interventions. Her phone showed 3 o'clock when she finally sat back, rubbing her tired eyes. The evidence was undeniable. She needed to talk to Gabriel again, but this time, she had something to return to him. His apartment building sat in a modest but well-maintained neighborhood. Nothing flashy, just honest working-class homes. Sloane climbed the stairs to apartment 203, took a deep breath, and knocked. Gabriel opened the door, surprise flickering across his face. "Sloane?" "I have something that belongs to you," she said quietly. He stepped back, inviting her in. The apartment was small but neat, with simple furniture and a few framed Bible verses on the walls. A well-worn Bible sat open on the coffee table. Sloane pulled out a folder. "These were in the archived records, too. They're copies of the documents you tried to show my parents, aren't they? The ones you tried to submit to investigators." Gabriel took the folder with careful hands, as if handling something precious. "Yes," he said softly, "though they didn't do much good then." "They might now," Sloane said, "along with what I found. But I wanted to return these to you first. You tried to do the right thing, even when no one would listen." Gabriel set the folder down and met her eyes. "What are you thinking of doing?" "I've been praying about it," Sloane said. I think we need legal help. Someone who can look at everything objectively and tell us the best way forward, not to create a scandal, but to set things right." "It won't be easy," Gabriel warned. "The truth will hurt some people, no matter how carefully it comes out." "I know. But letting lies stand hurts people too." Sloane gestured to him. "It's been hurting you for 8 years." Gabriel was quiet for a moment. "Would you pray with me about this?" The request surprised her, but felt right. They sat together on his worn couch, and Gabriel began to pray, his voice low and sincere. "Lord, we come before you seeking wisdom. Guide us in bringing truth to light in a way that honors you. Give us courage for what lies ahead, and help us remember that true justice and mercy come from your hand." Sloane found herself adding her own prayers, and for the first time since finding the documents, real peace settled over her. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but she wasn't walking it alone. When they finished praying, Sloane felt clarity about her next steps. "I know a lawyer who specializes in financial law," she said. "Someone discreet, who can review everything before we decide how to proceed. Would you be willing to share what you know with him?" Gabriel nodded. "Whatever helps bring the truth to light properly. Just be careful who you trust with this information for now." "I will," Sloane promised, standing to leave. At the door, she turned back. "Thank you for trying to warn them. I wish they had listened." "So do I," Gabriel said softly. "But maybe now is when the truth was meant to come out. When someone was ready to hear it." Sloane drove home under a sky turning purple with sunset, her mind settled on the path forward. The truth would come out, but carefully, properly through legal channels. Not for revenge or publicity, but for justice. Real justice that could finally bring healing to all the wounds that night had left behind. The morning sun cast long shadows across Pastor Helen's office as she introduced Sloane to Marcus Chen, a retired investigative journalist with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. His weathered notebook and careful manner spoke of decades spent pursuing difficult truths. "Pastor Helen tells me you've uncovered some sensitive information," Marcus said, settling into a worn leather armchair. His voice was gentle but direct, matching his reputation for handling delicate stories with care. Sloane glanced at Gabriel, who sat quietly beside her, before spreading the documents on Pastor Helen's desk. "These were found in archived court records," she began. "They suggest a pattern of financial transactions that doesn't match the public story about my parents." Marcus leaned forward, adjusting his glasses as he examined the papers. His expression remained neutral, but his eyes sharpened with recognition. "I remember covering the warehouse explosion," he said softly. "It never felt like we had the whole story." For the next 3 hours, they walked Marcus through everything: the misfiled documents, Gabriel's earlier attempts to warn people, the timeline they'd pieced together. The journalist took careful notes, occasionally asking precise questions that showed his expertise in following money trails. "The documentation is compelling," Marcus said finally, closing his notebook. "But you're right to proceed carefully. This kind of revelation needs proper legal handling." He pulled out a business card. "I know a trustworthy financial crimes prosecutor. She's retired now, but she can review everything and advise on next steps." Pastor Helen, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. "What concerns me most is protecting both of you through this process. The truth matters, but so do the people carrying it." Marcus nodded. "That's why I'd recommend preparing formal affidavits, sworn, statements detailing everything you found and remembered. It creates a legal record and protection." He looked at Gabriel. "Especially for you, given your previous attempts to come forward." Gabriel's voice was steady. "I'm ready to put everything on record. It's time." They spent the afternoon organizing documents and drafting initial statements. Marcus's experience helped them focus on key details that would matter most to investigators. As the sun began to set, Pastor Helen ordered sandwiches, insisting they all eat something. During a quiet moment while Marcus was making phone calls, Sloane found herself alone with Gabriel near the church's small kitchen. The evening light through stained glass windows painted colors across his face as he helped her prepare coffee for everyone. "Are you okay?" he asked softly, noting how her hands trembled slightly as she reached for coffee mugs. Sloane paused, really considering the question. "I think so," she said finally. "It feels right, bringing this to light properly, but it's also terrifying." She looked up at him. "What about you?" Gabriel's eyes met hers, full of understanding and something deeper that made her heart skip. "I've carried this truth alone for so long," he said. "Sharing it with you, seeing you believe it, that's worth whatever comes next." The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken feelings. Sloane found herself taking a step closer, drawn by the quiet strength and genuine care she'd come to recognize in him. "Gabriel, I know," he said gently. "Me too." His hand found hers, a brief touch that acknowledged everything they weren't yet free to say. "But right now, we need to focus on doing this right." Sloane nodded, squeezing his hand once before letting go. They both understood. Their growing feelings had to wait until the truth was properly revealed. Yet somehow, that shared commitment made what they felt even stronger. Back in Pastor Helen's office, Marcus helped them outline their formal affidavits. Gabriel's statement detailed his discovery of the financial scheme, his attempts to warn Sloane's parents, and the aftermath. Sloane's focused on the recently discovered documents and their significance. "Remember," Marcus advised as evening deepened into night. "Once you submit these, there's no going back. Are you both certain?" "Yes," Sloane said firmly, looking at the stack of papers that would change everything. "The truth needs to come out, not to hurt anyone, but to heal what's been broken." Gabriel's voice joined hers. "Together." Pastor Helen offered a closing prayer, asking for protection and wisdom for the path ahead. As they prepared to leave, she hugged them both. "Remember, my door is always open. Don't carry this alone." In the church parking lot, Sloane carefully placed her draft affidavit in her car's glove compartment. Tomorrow morning she would meet Marcus at the courthouse to file it properly. Looking up at the stars, she felt a strange mix of fear and peace. The truth would cost her family's reputation, but it would free them all from lies. Gabriel touched her shoulder gently. "Get some rest," he said. "Tomorrow's a big day." Sloane nodded, finding strength in his steady presence. "Thank you for being willing to go through this with me." "Always," he replied simply. Driving home, Sloane rehearsed what she would say in the morning when she filed her affidavit. The words needed to be perfect, clear, honest, and focused on justice rather than blame. Her heart ached for what this would mean for her parents' memory. But she knew bringing truth to light was an act of love, too. Hard love, but love nonetheless. At home, she carefully reviewed her statement one final time, making sure every detail was accurate. Tomorrow would change everything, but tonight she felt ready. The truth, handled with care and proper process, would finally have its day. Sloane woke to her phone buzzing frantically on her nightstand. Through bleary eyes, she saw 27 missed calls and countless text messages. Her heart jumped into her throat as she clicked on a news alert. Breaking: Whitmore family legacy, tainted by money laundering scandal. The words swam before her eyes. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not like this. They had planned to file everything properly this morning. Her hands shaking, she dialed Pastor Helen. "Turn on Channel 5, Pastor Helen said immediately, her voice tense. "Someone leaked everything to the media overnight." Sloane fumbled for her TV remote. The morning news showed reporters crowded outside her workplace, the City Museum. Her own face smiled back at her from an old newspaper photo, placed next to grainy security footage of her in the archives. Sources claim Sloane Whitmore, daughter of beloved philanthropists James and Margaret Whitmore, has uncovered evidence implicating her deceased parents in a massive financial scheme, the reporter announced. This shocking development. Sloane's phone buzzed again, her supervisor. "Don't come in today," he said curtly. "The board needs to evaluate this situation." The line went dead before she could respond. She tried calling Gabriel, but his phone went straight to voicemail. Panic rose in her chest as she quickly dressed, choosing a simple gray sweater and black pants. Outside, 2 reporters were already waiting by her car. "Miss Whitmore, did you deliberately set out to destroy your parents' reputation? How long have you been working with Gabriel Mercer to discredit your family?" She pushed past them without commenting, her hands trembling as she unlocked her car. The drive to work was a blur of anxiety and prayer. But the scene at the museum was even worse. At least 15 news vans lined the street, reporters clustering like hungry wolves. Security helped her through the crowd into the building. Inside, colleagues she'd known for years avoided her eyes. Her office door had been sealed with yellow tape. "Administrative review," the notice read. By noon, social media was ablaze. Old family friends posted lengthy statements distancing themselves from her. The city's largest charity, which her parents had helped found, issued a press release suspending all programs bearing the Whitmore name pending investigation. Then came the worst news. Pastor Helen called, her voice breaking. "Gabriel's been arrested. They're saying new evidence has emerged about his involvement in the warehouse explosion. Sloane, this feels coordinated." Sloane sank into a chair in the museum's empty break room, her legs no longer able to hold her. "This is my fault," she whispered. "I should have been more careful with those documents." "Listen to me," Pastor Helen said firmly. "You did nothing wrong. Someone wanted this to explode publicly instead of going through proper channels. The question is why?" Before Sloane could respond, her phone beeped with another call, the city attorney's office requesting an immediate meeting. With few options left, she agreed. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the city attorney's mahogany desk as he laid out their offer. "Miss Whitmore, we can make this go away," he said smoothly. "Issue a statement saying you misinterpreted the documents. We'll seal everything, preserve your parents' legacy. The museum board will reinstate you. The media will move on." "And Gabriel?" Sloane asked, her voice barely steady. The attorney's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Mercer has an extensive criminal record. His credibility won't hold up in court. It's better for everyone if he takes responsibility for past actions." Sloane felt sick. "You want me to let him take the blame, again?" "We want to protect what your parents built," he corrected. "Think about their charitable foundation, the scholarships in their name, all the good work that could be undone. Is that what they would want?" Driving home that evening, Sloane could barely see through her tears. The radio news reported Gabriel had been denied bail. Her phone showed dozens of angry messages from charity board members and family friends. Even Pastor Helen wasn't answering now. In her apartment, Sloane collapsed onto her couch. The silence felt suffocating. On her coffee table, family photos smiled up at her. Her parents at charity galas, receiving civic awards, always perfectly poised. Had they known what was happening? Had they been victims too? She picked up her mother's favorite photo frame, tracing the elegant silver edges. The truth had cost her everything: her job, her reputation, her parents' legacy, and now Gabriel. Sobs racked her body as darkness fell outside her windows. She had tried to do the right thing, and it had all gone horribly wrong. Her phone lit up with another news alert. "Whitmore scandal deepens. Daughter's relationship with convicted felon raises questions." The photo showed her and Gabriel leaving the cafe where they'd met to discuss the documents. Sloane's hands shook as she set down her phone. She had never felt so alone, so completely devastated. The weight of judgment from an entire city pressed down on her shoulders. In trying to bring truth to light, she had destroyed everything she loved. Curled up in the dark, Sloane wept until she had no tears left. The city lights twinkled mockingly outside her window, while inside, her world lay in ruins. The morning dawned cold and gray, a thin drizzle misting the empty streets. Sloane had barely slept, her eyes puffy from crying. She pulled on a simple sweater and jeans, avoiding the formal clothes that usually marked her public appearances. None of that mattered anymore. At 5:30 in the morning, she slipped out of her apartment building through the service entrance, grateful to find no reporters camping outside yet. They would come later, she knew. But for now, the city was still and peaceful. Pastor Helen's small church sat on a quiet corner, its brick walls weathered by decades of faithful service. Sloane found the side door unlocked, as promised. Inside, the sanctuary was dark except for a few candles near the altar where Pastor Helen knelt in prayer. "I wasn't sure you'd come," Pastor Helen said softly, rising to embrace Sloane. "After yesterday, I'm sorry I couldn't reach you last night," Sloane whispered, her voice rough from crying. "No, I'm the one who should apologize." Pastor Helen led her to a pew near the front. "I needed time to pray about my own response. Fear made me hesitate when you needed support most." They sat together in the dim light, the candles casting flickering shadows on the walls. Pastor Helen opened her worn Bible, its pages marked with countless sticky notes and highlights. "I've been reading about Daniel," she said, "how he faced the lions rather than stop praying to God. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego refusing to bow to false idols even under threat of death." She turned the pages gently. They chose truth over safety, integrity over compromise. Sloane twisted her hands in her lap. "The city attorney offered me a deal. They want me to say I was wrong about the documents. Let Gabriel take the blame again." Her voice cracked. They said it would protect my parents' legacy, all the good work being done in their name. And what do you believe that legacy truly is? Pastor Helen asked quietly. The buildings with their names on them? The newspaper headlines? Or the truth of who they were and what they stood for? Tears slid down Sloane's cheeks. I don't even know anymore. What if they were involved? What if they knew about the money laundering? Then that's part of their story too, Pastor Helen said firmly. God doesn't call us to protect comfortable lies. He calls us to walk in truth, even when it hurts. They sat in silence as morning light began filtering through the stained glass windows, painting rainbow patterns across the wooden pews. Pastor Helen turned to Proverbs, reading softly. Whoever walks in integrity walks securely, but whoever takes crooked paths will be found out. I'm scared, Sloane admitted. Not just for myself, but for Gabriel. They're using him as leverage, threatening to make him pay for everything. That's because they know your heart, Pastor Helen said. They're counting on your compassion being your weakness. She took Sloane's hand. But real love, the kind that reflects God's love, always chooses truth, even when it costs us everything. As they prayed together, Sloane felt something settling in her spirit. Not peace exactly, but certainty. The path ahead would be hard, but at least it was clear. By mid-afternoon, she had arranged to visit Gabriel at the county jail. The processing took over an hour. Forms to fill out, security checks, stern warnings about contact rules. Finally, they led her to a visiting room with scratched plastic dividers and phones mounted on the walls. Gabriel looked tired but composed when they brought him in, wearing standard orange jumpsuit. His eyes softened when he saw her, though he kept his expression neutral. They both picked up their phones. You shouldn't have come, he said quietly. They're probably photographing everyone who visits. I don't care anymore, Sloane replied. How are they treating you? I've had worse. He attempted a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Listen, Sloane, about the deal they're offering you. You know about that? He nodded. My lawyer told me. They made sure I knew the terms. His voice was carefully controlled. It's a good deal. You should take it. Gabriel, no. Sloane pressed her hand against the plastic barrier between them. I won't let them blame you again. Not when we both know the truth. The truth? He gave a bitter laugh. The truth is, I was there that night. I did have connections to the people who used that warehouse. Maybe not the way they claim, but enough to make the charges stick. Better me than watching them destroy everything you've built. Everything I've built is already destroyed, Sloane said softly. My job, my reputation, my parents' legacy, it's all gone. The only thing I have left is the choice to stand for truth or let fear silence me. Gabriel's eyes filled with tears. He quickly blinked away. I'm not worth this sacrifice, Sloane. I made my peace with carrying this burden years ago. This isn't just about you anymore, she replied. It's about what I can live with, what God is asking of me. She took a shaky breath. I'm testifying tomorrow at the emergency hearing. I'm going to tell them everything, about finding the documents, about your warnings to my parents, all of it. They'll crucify you in the press, Gabriel warned. Everything you do, every relationship you've ever had, they'll twist it all to discredit you. And I'll still be in here, unable to help. I know. Sloane managed a wavering smile. But at least I'll be able to look in the mirror. At least I'll know I chose truth over fear. Their time was almost up. Gabriel pressed his hand against the plastic, matching hers on the other side. Whatever happens, he said roughly, know that meeting you, seeing your courage, it's helped me believe in grace again. The guard called time. As they led Gabriel away, Sloane remained seated, phone still pressed to her ear. Through her tears, she watched him go. Head high, shoulders straight, accepting whatever came next. Outside the jail, reporters were already gathering, alerted somehow to her visit. But Sloane didn't try to avoid them this time. She walked straight to her car, ignoring their shouted questions. She had made her choice. Tomorrow she would speak the truth, no matter the cost. For now, that certainty was enough. The county courthouse loomed against the morning sky, its stone steps already crowded with reporters and spectators. Inside, the main courtroom buzzed with whispered conversations and the rustle of papers. Every wooden bench was filled, with people standing along the back wall. Sloane sat quietly at the witness table, hands folded in her lap. She had chosen a simple navy dress and her mother's brooch, one last time wearing the pin that represented everything she had believed about her family. Her pastor sat in the front row, offering silent support. Gabriel was brought in under guard, still in custody but allowed to attend. He took his seat without looking around, though Sloane felt his presence like a steady anchor behind her. "Please state your name for the record," the court clerk instructed. "Sloane Elizabeth Whitmore." Her voice carried clearly through the hushed room. The questioning began slowly, establishing her background, her parents' standing in the community, the basic timeline of events. Then came the critical moment. "Miss Whitmore, please tell the court about the documents you discovered in the museum archives." Sloane took a deep breath. "I found financial records that had been sealed and misfiled. They showed regular transfers between offshore accounts and local charities, transactions that used my parents' foundation as a cover for laundering money." A murmur ran through the courtroom. She continued steadily. The dates and amounts matched warnings that Gabriel Mercer had tried to bring to authorities years ago. He had attempted to alert my parents that their foundation was being used illegally. "And how do you know this?" "Because I found his original sworn statement, buried in those same files, along with threats made against him if he continued trying to expose the truth." The judge leaned forward. "Are you saying Mr. Mercer tried to prevent the criminal activity?" "Yes, Your Honor. He wasn't part of the scheme. He was trying to stop it. When the warehouse explosion happened, it was convenient to blame him. A former gang member made the perfect scapegoat. Photographs and documents were entered into evidence. Sloane identified each one calmly, explaining connections and timelines. She named powerful figures who had pressured her to stay silent. Through it all, her voice never wavered. "My parents weren't criminals," she said near the end. "But they were used by criminals. When they started asking questions, they became liabilities. I believe that's what led to their deaths." The courtroom had grown deathly quiet. Even the reporters had stopped scribbling, staring at Sloane with a mix of shock and grudging respect. She could feel the weight of Gabriel's gaze, though she didn't turn around. "Miss Whitmore," the judge said finally, "you understand the implications of your testimony? The number of prominent individuals implicated?" "I do, Your Honor. I also understand that by testifying, I've likely destroyed my own reputation and my parents' legacy. But I believe truth matters more than reputation, and I believe justice is more important than comfort." The judge studied her for a long moment, then turned to the district attorney. "I am ordering an immediate investigation into all parties named in these documents. Mr. Mercer is to be released pending review of his case." He raised his gavel. "This hearing is adjourned for deliberation. But I want it noted that Miss Whitmore's courage in coming forward may have uncovered one of the largest corruption schemes in our city's history." The gavel fell with a sharp crack. The courtroom erupted in chaos, reporters rushing for phones, lawyers huddling with clients, spectators talking over each other. But Sloane remained still, eyes closed, feeling the weight of years lifting from her shoulders. When she finally looked back, Gabriel was being uncuffed. Their eyes met across the room. No words needed, just quiet understanding passing between them. Whatever came next, the truth was finally out. The cost had been high, but the price of silence would have been higher. The judge's voice cut through the noise. "Bailiff, please clear the courtroom. I want the FBI Fraud Division contacted immediately. We have work to do." Dawn broke over the city with a different energy. News vans crowded the courthouse steps as federal agents led 3 city officials away in handcuffs. Inside, prosecutors filed formal charges against 11 prominent business leaders and politicians implicated in the money laundering scheme. At the county jail, Gabriel collected his few belongings, signing release papers with steady hands. The morning sunlight felt different on his face, cleaner somehow. A guard who had watched the hearing on television nodded respectfully as he passed. Across town, Sloane sat in the museum director's office, her resignation letter carefully typed and signed. "The museum needs to distance itself from this situation," she explained gently. "I won't let my presence compromise the institution's reputation." The director, an elderly woman who had known Sloane since childhood, wiped away tears. "You're just like your mother, always putting others first." "No," Sloane said softly. "I'm finally being myself." By afternoon, her office was packed into 3 small boxes. Her savings would cover rent for a few months, but beyond that, uncertainty loomed. Somehow the prospect didn't frighten her anymore. The local news reported that the motorcycle club was announcing major changes. Their president stood before cameras declaring a complete restructuring. They would become a legitimate non-profit focused on youth outreach and addiction recovery. Gabriel's vindication had opened doors for positive change. As evening settled over the city, Sloane met Gabriel at a small coffee shop. Without discussing it, they began walking together through quiet residential streets. Fall leaves crunched under their feet. Neither felt the need to hide or look over their shoulders. "The truth really does set you free," Sloane mused, watching children play in front yards. Gabriel nodded. "Even when it costs everything." "Not everything," she corrected gently, "just the things that were weighing us down." They walked in comfortable silence, their steps naturally falling into the same rhythm. The neighborhood around them continued its peaceful evening routines. Dogs being walked, porch lights coming on, dinner being prepared behind lit windows. They were just 2 more people taking an evening stroll, no longer carrying the burden of secrets. The spring sun warmed the restored brick walls of Hope Community Center, formerly the abandoned Miller Street warehouse. Fresh paint and new windows had transformed the building from a symbol of tragedy into one of redemption. Inside, natural light streamed through skylights, illuminating the busy main hall where volunteers worked with local youth on various projects. Sloane looked up from her desk in the corner office, watching Gabriel lead a woodworking class. His patient instruction and gentle encouragement brought out the best in the teenagers, many of whom came from challenging backgrounds. The sight made her smile. This was exactly what the center was meant to be. Their shared office was modest but welcoming, with motivational posters and thank you cards from program participants pinned to a corkboard. A small cross hung near the door, reminding them of the foundation of their work. The salary wasn't much, but it was enough. They had found that living simply brought its own kind of wealth. "Miss Whitmore?" A young volunteer poked her head in. "The donation truck is here." "Thank you, Sarah." Sloane grabbed her clipboard and headed to the loading dock, where Gabriel was already helping to unload boxes of supplies. They worked in comfortable synchronization, moving furniture and organizing materials for upcoming projects. "Remember when this place was just empty walls and broken glass?" Gabriel asked, wiping sweat from his forehead. Sloane nodded, remembering their first walkthrough of the building. Many had questioned their decision to reclaim this space, but they had seen its potential. Just as they had seen the potential in each other, despite their painful history. Their daily routine revolved around morning prayer meetings, program coordination, and endless cups of coffee shared between tasks. Local churches partnered with them regularly, and even some former critics had become supporters after seeing the center's positive impact on the community. As sunset approached, they began their closing routine. Gabriel checked all the windows, while Sloane filed the day's paperwork. The last few volunteers gathered their belongings and said their goodbyes. Standing in the main hall, Sloane took a moment to absorb the peace of the empty building. Photos along the walls showed smiling faces of program participants, before and after shots of renovation projects and community events. This was their real legacy, not the preserved facade of respectability her parents had maintained, but the genuine work of restoration and healing. "Ready?" Gabriel asked softly, holding her coat. "Just thinking," she replied. "About legacy. It's funny, I spent so many years trying to protect my parents' reputation, but real legacy isn't about protecting anything. It's about redemption." Gabriel nodded, understanding in his eyes. Together they walked to the main entrance. The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, a daily reminder of God's artistry. Sloane watched as Gabriel locked the door, his movements deliberate and careful, just like everything else he did. They stood for a moment, hand in hand, looking at the building that had once represented their greatest pain, but now symbolized their hope. They were free from secrets, from false obligations, from the weight of appearances. United in purpose and faith, they walked toward their car, ready to return tomorrow for another day of meaningful work. The center stood quiet behind them, its windows reflecting the sunset's glow, a beacon of light in the neighborhood, just as truth had been a beacon in their lives. If this story made you pause, reflect, or even smile, don't forget to subscribe. I post daily, and the next story might be exactly what you need to hear.